This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
Body Bags with Joseph Scott Moore. Well, hey, friends, here we are. We're at the top 3 episodes of Body Bags that have been downloaded over the previous year. And when we go over these, you'll see why, because they are 3 cases that have captured the imagination of all true crime fans. So without further ado, I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags. Well, here we are, Dave, heading into the final 3.
When we were looking at the top 3 most downloaded episodes, the number 3, Gypsy Rose Blanchard. And it's amazing to me that it doesn't amaze me that the episode was because the title of it was, or is, Shocking Crime Scene Photos Tell New Story About Gypsy Rose.
To quote the lyrics of an old song, I'm a Rod Stewart fan, but old Rod Stewart, and one of my favorite songs is Every Picture Tells a Story. And in this particular case, as we've mentioned already, the photography that, if you remember, I have a different memory. The reason this really caught our attention, Dave, is the fact that these photos were re-released. And that was something I think that both you and I both said, why?
Right.
Why? And, it's not like people had not seen them before, but again, it continues on with this kind of salacious thread that, that the media, propagates. I think, that goes without saying, a blind person could see that.
What did we learn from the pictures, though, from these photos that were released? Because a lot of people had a vision like I did. I had a version of events in my head, Joe, of what I thought took place. And the pictures actually told a different story of what really happened to Dee Dee Blanchard.
And she was killed in the spot where she slept in that bed. And, I think at the time I remember reflecting on this, and particularly as it applies to individuals that are taken unawares, where you don't have, and we talk a lot about blood evidence and blood trails and drag marks and all those things that we cover on Body Bags. But in this particular case, we got the impression, at least, because of how super saturated that mattress and the associated bedclothes were, if you will, surrounding Dee Dee Blanchard's body, that everything that happened right there. And that goes to part of the plan that Go to Jay, and also, and we can't forget that she, Gypsy Rose, took part in. Listen, this is, it was horrible what she had to do growing up. Okay. And she didn't have to do it. She was forced to do it, to the point where she had things happening to her, like her salivary glands were being removed.
How did you remove somebody's salivary glands, Joe? And what would provoke a doctor to do that? What could I tell a doctor about a child that would have him do that?
I don't know. And there's a litany, a cornucopia, if you will, of medical problems that this young girl was diagnosed with, or at least it was implied that she had it. And that's where I have a real problem with the medical community on this, because I think that there's some liability here still to this day, because, they were treating her for non-existent conditions. She had been diagnosed, or it was at least implied, that she had muscular dystrophy, that she had ongoing seizures, that she had vision and hearing impairment, that she had asthma. Oh, and here's a really good one, that she had, Dave, leukemia. So you, you put this all together and you look at it and you think about what she was subjected to. And again, I think many of us look at this from the perspective of making maybe a moral judgment. It's like if anybody deserves to have retribution, maybe it was Gypsy Rose, but it's the way things happened for her. This is still a homicide. This is a brutal homicide of a woman who was taken while she slept, I believe, in that bed, and she stabbed multiple times by, admittedly, by Go-to-John, Gypsy Rose's quote unquote boyfriend that she had met, which is, quite bizarre in and of itself, the relationship that they had. But you can see the condition of the house vis-a-vis these photos, and I think that as striking as the crime scene images were, one of the things that was really a tell for me, and I'm kind of reading into this a bit, is that Dee Dee Blanchard is a hoarder. Bags and bags of stuff, of junk in this house that had been collected. It's almost like, I almost envisioned her, I had this idea of her pushing around this child in a wheelchair, and kind of like one of those games that kids play where you go around collecting as many gold coins as you can. And that's kind of the life that she led. And it extends all the way from South Louisiana, which, if we remember, they claimed that they were refugees from Katrina, Dave. This is how far back this goes. And that was in August of 2005. And then, they sucker in, the people up in Springfield, Missouri, which, by the way, is where my wife's family are all from. They're from that area of the country, and they're nice, salt of the earth folks up there. And you can see, these two come rolling into town. They're Katrina refugees. They wind up milking these people for a house. They get a nice little pink house, and the house, yes, it was pink, and you can see kind of this life that was lived, in here, disordered, chaotic, but all with a singular purpose, at the hand of Dee Dee Blanchard, utilizing her daughter as a prop, because that's what she wound up being. I can understand why there'd be anger over this, but it's almost as if we forget that there was a murder that took place in that little home, Dave. And it was certainly a brutal murder. Wouldn't you agree?
Murdering her mother was a heinous act. And what Nicholas Go-to-John and Gypsy did to her mother is horrific. But I have to wonder about the mental well-being of Gypsy Rose Blanchard, her maturity level, because at the time she seemed much younger than her age, her physical age anyway. And I just wonder if the damage is going to be lifelong. Can she, Gypsy Rose Blanchard, ever truly recover from what her mother did to her for her entire life up until the moment that Gypsy Rose Blanchard and Nicholas Go-to-John killed her?
Yeah. And, here's the rub. She learned, I think, from a master manipulator relative to her mother, Dee Dee Blanchard. And Go-to-John was easily manipulated, I think. He has, as they say, I believe he's on the spectrum. And he was looking for a relationship, and they certainly found it, in the digital space, if you will. And of course, this winds up being even more ghastly when you think about this, because this was almost I don't know if we can state that she was actively recruiting someone to that end, if that was in her forefront, that this individual that I involve myself with in a relationship is going to be an extension of what I want to do to get rid of my mother and free me from this circumstance. But at the end of the day, here's something that is quite fascinating, Dave, is that as we look back over these many years that this case has been covered, the horror that took place in that little bitty house in Springfield. The photos of Dee Dee Blanchard's body revealed, first off, that it had singularly occurred in that bed. And that's important because reflectively, we think about, well, how do you know when someone is asleep? And how do you gain access to that location so you don't alert her? Well, that tells us a lot about the perpetrator. First off, they would be aware of when she was sleeping. And secondly, they would know where she was located. This house was an absolute nightmare to make your way through because of all of the refuse and junk that was in there. So you would have to have a guide. You would have to be familiar. And by extension, that gives us an idea that seemingly, Gypsy Rose might not have had the physical capability to wield a weapon. So I think for investigators, you're thinking, well, has she been kidnapped? And maybe someone who fancied her for whatever reason has taken her away, and that individual killed the mom because they had enough strength to do it. Anybody that knew anything about Gypsy Rose Blanchard, and I would assume that community up there certainly did, they would have known that she was a weakened person, that she was sick, that she was ill. So they knew that they were looking for somebody else that may have had connection to this case. But she was killed in that location. And it also gives you an indication that the person that did this had the physical strength, because Dee Dee is not a small person, that they could essentially climb upon her back and be able to begin to drive that knife over and over and over again into her. That's what
that would be Nicholas Godejohn that sat on her back and knifed her.
That would be how that took place. And of course, we can't forget the really kind of sick nature that accompanied all of that. And I hate to dwell on this or remind people, but I think that it's important. Remember, he had actually had necrophilic fantasies about having sex with Dee Dee Blanchard's body, which again is enough to send even the strongest among us, hurtling toward the toilet to vomit. So yeah, this was well planned and simply based upon the structure of this home, just packed to the roof with garbage that was contained therein. The individuals would have had knowledge of the interior of this home. And I think that many, many people, probably a lot of law enforcement people at the time, thought that Gypsy Rose may have very well been in danger, but I don't know. Was she actually a puppet master? Who knows? We hope that Gypsy Rose Blanchard has matured and learned a lesson, because as it turns out now, she's pregnant with her own child. We'll see how this goes. So, Dave, this brings us to the number 2 most downloaded episode of Body Bags over this past year. And who occupies this space? Well, it's a case that's familiar to many people up in the Northeast, particularly those in Connecticut. Dave, I don't know if that gives any hints to our friends, but you go ahead and do the big answer here.
The number 2 most downloaded show of the past year was Missing Mom Murder Trial. Blood evidence could prove she's not missing. Now, I got to credit Jackie with this one. Jackie Howard, who is the executive producer of Crime Stories with Nancy Grace and is the mother of all mothers when it comes to crime producing. She came up with that title. And if you look at the title, you're thinking, well, what does it mean? Is she not dead? Is she missed? What's going on here? Well, the blood evidence could prove she's not missing. She's dead. And it's a term that, Joe, you've taught me to use.
With life.
Incompatible with life. The amount of blood found in this case was incompatible with life. Therefore, Jennifer Dulos, the 50-year-old mother of 5, who was she and her husband, Fotis Dulos, were divorcing. They were separate. He already had another girlfriend. He was a very rich guy. They'd had many ups and downs in their marriage, but when everything was said and done, he was not allowing his wife to just leave. He was really, he's got a girlfriend, but he's doing everything he can to keep his wife, Jennifer, or his ex-wife, under his thumb. And so when she drops the kids off at school, heading into Memorial Day weekend holiday, if I'm not mistaken, drops the kids off at school, goes home, but doesn't make any appointments the rest of her day. Immediately, that's red flag. She's one of these people. If she says, I'm going to be there at 10, she's there at 10. And she had several appointments that day that she never made it to. And so when she was reported missing that evening, police immediately started right there at the house. And in the garage where the cars, they found blood. They found blood evidence in the car, in the garage. Then they found what appeared to be a cleanup effort that had been made in the garage and in the kitchen. And from there, it was an amazing job done by police. They were able to find security footage all over town, CCTV cameras and everything else that showed a man appearing to be Fotis Dulos driving around town with a woman who turned out to be Michelle Troconis, his girlfriend, and they were putting stuff in trash cans.
Yeah, I'll never forget that, seeing him, ride around town in his pickup truck and dumping stuff off at random trash cans. I remember seeing the CCTV for that. And remember the incompatibility thing, you mentioned just a second ago. Here's another word that I use periodically, and it is copious. And I love that term. It's something that you're not going to hear in common conversation, but forensic pathologists, whom I've worked for years and years, use this term, and it's generally in conjunction with the word blood, copious amounts of blood. And when you see copious, which means a lot, you know that given the amount of blood that's found at any one location, the individual that has shed this blood is not going to be still upright and vertical and among the land of the living, because it is, in fact, incompatible with life. And so we go back to, in the Dulos case in particular, we begin to think about, who would have access to her, who would know her schedule, particularly with all those babies they've got, moving them about, going from place to place. And yes, she did have some help from time to time, but as you said, she always came across from her friends as you could set your watch by her because she was always on time. And when you have 5 kids and you're trying to juggle a household by yourself now, if you don't hit those marks, particularly on time every single day, everything behind that's following that is going to be screwed up from a time. And you and I understand that. I think probably my wife understands it better than I do because she'll plan a bunch of stuff and I'll say, how in the world are we going to accomplish all these tasks? And it's because of her planning that we're able to, because you shouldn't leave it to me. But that's a first indicator here, I think, that, she's gone. And what do you do in a case like this? I can only imagine the conversations that took place in the DA's office as they're thinking, okay, we don't have the corpus delicti. We don't have the body of the crime or the person. How are we going to prosecute this? Because as soon as you go to trial with a murder case, I don't like the word murder, it's such a lawyer's word, homicide case, and you're absent the body, it doubles the problems that you're going to encounter along the way.
We know early on it was a missing person case that most of us covering the story believed was not going to end up good. You had Jennifer Dulos and Fotis Dulos who were going through a divorce. Fotis Dulos has a big house. He's a very wealthy guy. And he has his girlfriend, Michelle Troconis, who's with him. He's got Jennifer Dulos, his soon-to-be ex-wife. They're still technically married while they're separated. And she is managing the 5 children. And I think the part of all of this that that really does get right down to it was the planning that went into it by Fotis Dulos. And I'm going to throw in there, and his girlfriend. She was a part of this in getting rid of evidence. It was Michelle Troconis who told police that the body of Jennifer Dulos had been in the back of the truck at some point during the day. And when you start saying the body of somebody, then that you're not saying she was in there as a human being alive and breathing. She's now a body. She is now dead. And it was Michelle Troconis telling police that because they had found something they believed to be blood in the truck that tested positive for Jennifer Dulos' DNA. It was Michelle Troconis who said, well, yeah, her body had been in that truck. That's when they arrested Fotis Dulos, because up until that point, they were just trying to put this together. And of course, they did arrest him, and Michelle Troconis ended up being the source for a lot of information that they had. But police put together an incredible case, Joe, to find the videos and taking this vehicle and this bicycle, and this was borrowed, and here's video of him washing out the truck. You remember how they traced all this back? They did a timeline on Fotis Dulos that was really remarkable in telling the story, even though they had all of this video of Fotis Dulos doing all these different things. We never saw Jennifer Dulos in any of it.
It never did. And I think that the big question that is always going to kind of resonate, for years to come, is what happened. What actually happened to her remains. Where did they finally come to their final resting spot, if you will? And many people out there believe that there's might be an element of dismemberment here, and that her body was essentially broken up into elements and deposited in various locations. And that's the big puzzle with this, I think. And look, Fotis Dulos is dead now. I mean, he took his own life. So, you're not going to get any answers from him. Now, as far as what would the girlfriend do? Does she, is she going to have some epiphanal moment, where she's able to actually say, and I'm thinking about the children right now, where she's, go ahead.
Joe, they did, she was convicted. Right. Michelle Troconis was convicted in the disappearance of Jennifer Dulos, and her body's never been found. The body of Jennifer Dulos has never been found. And Michelle Troconis was convicted of being involved in this. You would have thought at some point she would have coughed up something, but she didn't. It was at her sentencing when, we have impact statements made by family, and two of the children in particular, Theodore Dulos, asked Michelle Troconis, to reveal what happened. He, in his impact statement, he asked for her, tell me what happened to my mom, please. Can you imagine being in the courtroom, Joe, on either side of this case, and hearing the child asking the convicted individual now, after all the evidence, and you've got this person who's, my mother was my best friend. She was my mom. You're the only person that has this information. Please, for the love, tell me what happened. And she refuses.
Yeah, and that's the chord that this strikes. That's why I'm hoping that at some point in time that there's going to be a change of heart, because as we know, and we always say, there's no such thing as closure, but it goes into the nature. It goes into who we are as humans. There is a need for us all to confirm things in our life. And many times when it comes to death, and I've seen this played out so much, that if we cannot see it, if we can not touch it. It didn't ever really happen. That's what I believe family members are asking, if we can confirm it, just so that we know where she is, where are her remains. I hope and pray for mercy for the family in this particular case, because it is certainly a tragedy, because not only was Jennifer Dulos murdered, but her family, those that remain, are left in a state of not knowing for the rest of their lives. So, Dave, we've arrived at number one, the number one downloaded episode of Body Bags for this previous year. And boy, is it a humdinger. It's something I think that captured the imagination of the country, not necessarily in the immediate, but when people were able to get a glimpse at this subject who was accused of 2 brutal homicides, it sent a chill up and down their collective spines, because I think that perhaps they knew that there was evidence that evil was afoot. And unfortunately, these 2 innocent women came face to face with it, Dave.
This episode, the original air date was June 27th of 2024, Joe. And the title was Evil Has a Tattoo Face, The Death of 2 Women. And if I'm not mistaken, when you and I were prepping and getting ready to do the show, that normally when we have multiple deaths by one individual, they're planned out for a reason, and they're conducted, in a fashion that you can actually, not make sense of, but you know what I mean? You can see the process, the thought process that went into it. That's not the case here. In this particular case, we have evil unleashed. The guy got fame because of the tattoo. He has a smile tattooed on his face. And if you remember that, the murders, the crimes were just so scatological. They made no sense. They just happened to be crimes of opportunity. And instead of just, stealing a car or doing this or that, he's murdering. He is just flat out doing what he wants to do. And murder happened to be part of what he wanted to do.
Of course, we're talking about Wade Wilson here. And he did become rather, well, I hate to say famous. He's already infamous, but yeah, infamous. He certainly, I think that people looked at him and thought, what is wrong with you? And interestingly enough, Dave, I got to point this out to you, and forgive me for the person that actually what podcast this was. I wish I could recall the name of it. A gentleman was being interviewed who is a former prisoner in a penitentiary and had been around all of the gangs in prisons. And it's a fascinating subculture that's in there. When you see how these gangs are structured and what the names are, and there's ethnic affiliations, and there particularly crime organizations that are in there that you kind of saddle up with those individuals. But this guy made a real interesting point specifically about Wade Wilson, and it really caught my attention when I heard him say it. He said, I don't care, or the prisoners are not going to care how tough you might perceive yourself to be on the outside, with all of your tattoos, these creepy things with the smile that is in place. What he drew my attention to, and I'm actually looking at the image right now, was the fact that Wade Wilson has got a swastika that is kind of tiny, and it is literally tattooed on his face below his right eye. And you know what this guy said that absolutely sent a chill up and down my spine? Swastikas and anything associated with the Nazis, and also there are other ones too that we're not going to go into, but that generally goes to the Aryan Brotherhood, and they don't care if you get a swastika on your face. You're not affiliated with them. Guess what he said, Dave? He said there's a high probability that tattoo is coming off of you. And he went on to say that in prison, if you're not part of the Aryan Brotherhood and you have these tattoos, affiliation is a big way that people survive. He said they will take an instrument and remove it from your body. And I was thinking, holy smokes. I caught that, I was like listening to it. And I'm fascinated by some of these. There's a gentleman that's out there that has a podcast that talks about these, life on the inside and that sort of thing. And he was interviewing this individual, and the fact that it was Wade Wilson, and we covered this case, and we had talked about, just like the media had, about all of these tattoos, what did that have any underlying meaning? And why in the world you would go out there and put a swastika on your face? The skulls are one thing, okay, and the smile and all that stuff, that's whatever. But you go and you put something like that on your person, you're asking for trouble. And unfortunately, in this case, we've got these two women that wound up encountering evil, Dave.
Still to this day, I'm shocked by this story. And again, the most downloaded episode of the year, and we had a bunch of them. We've watched Body Bags really climb the charts over the last year around the world as far as crime-related podcasts go, mainly because of Joseph Scott Morgan and your appearances on. You're probably the most requested guest of most networks when it comes to covering crime stories because of your background and your ability to teach. And I will tell you, Joe, every day we do this, I learn something. And I mean, not just some cursory trivia answer. I'm talking about learning about what really happens when somebody, dies, and what goes into the process of solving a crime that you can't just say, I think this person did it for these reasons. A lot of times we'll have motive before we have the actuality of what happened. And we think, well, Joe had the motive to kill Dave. Dave kept interrupting him, and Joe just had his fill and had to take him out. And, so you start there. But in this case, we start with the bodies, In the case of Wade Wilson, not Deadpool, but Wade Wilson, the swastika under the right eye guy, he was charged with the first-degree murder of Christine Melton, and charged with the first-degree murder of Diane Ruiz. And it took jurors only a couple hours to convict him of the charges. He was also facing grand theft of Christine Melton's car. This guy was a one-man wrecking crew, a one-man crime wave over a very short period of time. And one of the stories that I actually was looking at had this line in it. Despite a tattooed smile on his face, he sat with no expression, no reaction as he heard graphic testimony about the women he killed. He meets Christine Melton. He's having a couple of adult beverages, happens. You go out, have a couple of drinks, you meet somebody that, hey, kind of hit it off, want to continue the conversation. They went back to Christine's place and he kills her. They had no relationship prior to meeting, having drinks, Joe. They didn't know one another.
Yeah, and that's
at that point. He might not even known her full name.
No, and I think that's what, if fear can be a motivator for people in true crime, and I think to a certain degree it is, because I think most people that are out there, no matter how many true crime shows they watch, how many podcasts they listen to, there are many that still can't comprehend that this much evil exists out there. And the fact, the random nature of this, that this is not like Wade Wilson, and we've talked about this, about familial homicides over the, when you live with people, there's anger that builds up, there's animosity that builds up. That's not what this is. This is an individual that literally took two random women and literally destroyed these women. And it was very personal, Dave, because in both of these cases, we're talking about strangulation. And this is up close and personal, Dave.
I can't even figure out how he did the second one. He kills Christine Melton inside her home. Right? I mean, just strangles her and takes her car. He's driving down the road hours after killing a woman he had only met the night before. He's driving down, he sees a woman who is walking home from work. Think about that for just a minute. He is driving the car of a woman he just murdered when he sees a woman walking home from work, Diane Ruiz. He stops, not to offer her a ride, apparently, but he asks for directions. Because if he offered her a ride and she's on her way home from work, tattoo face is going to be enough for her to say, no, thank you. I don't need a ride. I'm good. But he lures her by saying, I need directions. Can you help me? So she comes over to offer him some help. He then strangles her, Joe. He strangles this woman and then throws her body on the road and runs over it.
Yeah, it's hard to take the measure of it. That such violence could have occurred at his hand in a very short period of time, and it's you've got all these other associated property crimes that come along with it. This guy, thank God, he didn't have access to explosives or something that could have killed tens of people out there, perhaps, over a period of time, a very short period of time. He literally decided to strike out at two women. This is something that he, I think at least, that he plotted, that he probably fantasized about. And look, we can sit around and talk all day about psychiatric and psychological mumbo jumbo and talk about, well, he didn't get enough time as a child with his mother, or he was abandoned by a father, or whatever. As a matter of fact, his father plays into this because his father actually offered testimony at his trial. Right. And, he had, Wilson had confessed to his father about what he had done. But Brother Dave, I got to tell you, this case in and of itself is the epitome of how evil things are many times. And we don't have an awareness of it. And for every case like Wade Wilson, there are other cases that are out there that are equally as evil. It just so happens that it caught our attention and the rest of the media broadly because of the fact that it was kind of advertised with these things that he had put on his body. These are not things that are, it's not like he's got little butterflies tattooed on his face. Okay, we're talking about the epitome of evil here. And how much more striking is it when, we think about that there are people that are out there that are probably equally as evil that don't have a single mark on them. These are just two women that were innocent that he was able to get close to and end their lives, Dave.
It was his father who testified, and it was his biological father who actually was able to fill in parts of the story that we don't know, because there was only Wade Wilson and his victims. In each instance, there was nobody else there. So we only have the story from what he told his biological father when he says that when we wouldn't know, for example, that Christine Melton was strangled. She fell asleep, and he strangled her in her sleep. He rolls her up in carpeting and is going to try to stick her body in the trunk of the car after a couple hours, but rigor mortis is set in, and he can't get her in there. So he leaves her body, but takes her car. We only know this because that's what he told his dad on the phone. Then we find out that he sees Miss Reese walking her way home, and he strangled her, asking for directions. Now, they don't know, they being the prosecutors didn't know if he actually lured her into the car and strangled her in the car, or if when she came near the car to give him directions, he strangled her there and pulled her in. But we do know that Wilson told his dad that he's got this dead body and he's looking for a place to bury it. He's thinking, where do I need? And he realizes she's not dead. She's alive. So he tells his dad, he pulled her out of the car and she was like spaghetti. She was lifeless, limp, but she was still breathing. And he throws her on the car and then runs over her. The only reason we have this information is because that's what he told his dad. Now, his dad says, hey, you need to get out of town. I'm going to call you an Uber. Okay, where are you? And he's like, oh, thanks, Dad. And instead of calling Uber, his dad calls U.S. Marshals and they go and pick him up. Otherwise, if Wade Wilson doesn't call his father, there's no telling. His dad, when he was asked, why did do you regret calling police or whatever? He's like, no, he would have done it again.
I know that probably the father will have sleepless nights over this. He will, maybe mourn the fact that his son did this, but in a weird kind of way, he really did society a big favor here because, as he stated, there's no telling how many other people Wade Wilson would have added to the list. Friends, thank you for your support over the past year. I appreciate all of the kind words that I receive in messages from all of you from all over the world now. And thank you for supporting my efforts along with Dave to put out a quality podcast where people can learn a little bit about forensic science and have an enjoyable journey through an otherwise very, very evil world. We thank you, and we look forward to 2025 being with you and talking more about the stories that'll be in the news and maybe along the way, a few historical cases. Either way, I appreciate you. And as you know, I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed Human.